Whenever a new patch is released, there are a lot of excitement going around all over. Some champions get positively adjusted, some get the opposite, and some items get temporarily removed. We still miss your aggression. Among all these changes, the meta of the game changes as well. Directly related to that are tier lists. We see them everywhere, from the comments on Discord to whole threads dedicated to the subreddit. However, this leads us to ask some questions. Some of them are, why are there so many tier lists? Or even, which tier list should I trust? But the question we should be asking ourselves is, should tier lists always be trusted? So let's start with the basics. What is a tier list? For those who don't know, it's a list that ranks all champions based on the strength of their kit and the potential to win in matches, assuming equal skill on each part of the player. Here's an example of the Paladins World tier list from OB39. While we use SS as our highest rated champion, some people can use S, S+, or even SSSSSSS if they so desire. However, the general layout is the highest rated champion is at the top of the list, work its way down to the least rated champion. Just to clarify, I say we because I am a Paladins World staff. It's a fancy way of saying I help on Discord and I write the articles as well, like this one. Now that we know what a tier list is, we need to understand that there are multiple types of tier lists. There's two in Paladins to be precise, casual and competitive. In Paladins there are multiple game modes, which means there's two ways of picking champions. There's casual, in which same champion can be picked 2 times, and there's competitive, where one champion is picked 1 player. So in a competitive queue there is also an additional picking phase. So one team, or the first team to pick, will have 1 pick, then the next team will get 2 picks, and so on and so forth, until all 5 champions have been picked for each team. Before starting the match, there is also a chance to swap the champions. So if Makoa is first picked by the player, but the player plays supports, they can swap it with the team members before the game starts. Thus, playing casual versus competitive will have different metas. In casuals, it's possible to get a mirror matchup, which means the same champions for both teams, but in competitive you can proper pick counters. As an example, Pip will counter Buck. Most tier lists tend to be competitive, which makes sense, rising in the ranks to reach the top 100 leaderboards overall or for a specific champion, showing the enemy that you're a force to be reckoned with, or have the respect of your teammates. There are also tier lists for casual play, but they tend to be very similar to competitive lists. I say tier lists here because they're not lists per se, they tend to be normally the strongest champion in the patch and pick them first. Of course you can pick the strongest champions, which would make an unbreakable team. But if the champion is not grossly overpowered, how do you know if a champion is strong and which is in urgent need of a buff or not? This brings us to the first point on why you should always take tier lists with a grain of salt. Most tier lists are based on opinion, what the creator of the tier list think is strong or weak. Currently, there is no way for people outside of high-res to view win rates of a champion. Paladin's Guru has win rates available, but that's for loadouts, not overall champions. So most champion tier lists we see are based on opinion. Wait, didn't I just say there's no way for people to collect the data for overall champion win rates? So how can I say most tier lists are based on opinion and not all? Well, yes, because some creators, including us at Paladins World, make tier lists from the data collected at tournaments. Now, tournaments are a great place for many things for various reasons. From a spectator's point of view, it's entertaining to watch and gives you an idea of what a top level gameplay looks like. From a perspective of a player, it helps you formulate strategies and tricks that you may not have considered before. From a perspective of analysts like us, it's a goldmine of data. What items are picked up, what playstyles are most effective, what are the hotspots on individual maps, and of course, what are the champion picks. Tier lists, as we defined earlier, are champion ranked based on their strength of the respective kit, assuming equal skill of players. Focusing exactly on the last part, equal skill. So the players can win their normal matches with whatever the team, but in a 5-on-5 it's a completely different story. So Paladins doesn't have an option for a 5v5 competitive queue, so in a way, if you have climbed the whole ELO solo ladder, the final rung is tournaments. Of course, it goes without saying that there's also different levels of skill in tournaments as well. For example, if 5 completely new players have good enough teamwork to win pub games, they will most definitely be defeated by players that have been playing together since the first day of closed beta. So therefore an open beta isn't the best place to make a tier list because of the skill disparity. However, in the later stages, quarter or even maybe semi-finals, the teams are a lot closely matched in skill. Better than that, the LAN tournaments such as the Paladins Invitational during HRX was another good way. The best teams from the respective regions compete against each other for a prize pool and fame. The skill gap here is minimal for the most part. I say this because Paladins was released in NA and EU regions first, which was in late November of 2015. Extra region specific servers for Oceania, Latin America, Brazil and even China were released in September 2016. So even at LAN there are skills, which is evident at HRX with NA and EU in the semi-finals. Abyss Gaming from Oceania was the exception. By now you must have guessed the other main point, the individual skill of players. Arguably this is the most important aspect which decides if the games are lost or won. Skill covers a lot of mechanics. This includes, but not limited to, aim, game sense, counterpicking, itemization, champion knowledge, cooldown management, etc. As you can see, there are a lot of elements at play here. Like we said before, no two players are ever the same. Player A could have impeccable projectile aim but horrible game sense, while player B could be the exact opposite. So if player A makes a tier list, no doubt they would prefer projectile based champions over hit scan because that's what they're used to playing. If player B manages to counter all the projectile champions with a hit scan champion, let's say Grog, then the champion will be on the top of the tier list and possibly even suggested by the player to be adjusted. Rarely are people willing to admit that they have been outplayed. They rather take comfort in the fact knowing that they lost because the champion was OP. There are very few players who will consider they got outplayed. Coming back to player A, they could not be winning as many games as Cassie, could be due to any reason. They could then suggest adjusting the champion because they're not using their full potential. Cassie could be in a perfectly fine place, but just because one player doesn't feel like it, he ranks her lower on his tier list and then advises her to get positively readjusted or get a buff. While this doesn't apply to many professional players, some do fall into this trap as well. They are definitely more mechanically skilled than the average player, but that doesn't mean they can't be biased. See, another thing to be wary of are the tier lists that are made immediately when a new patch hits. They aren't generally tier lists, but more often they are first impressions. A good example of this would be the release of Torvald. A lot of tier lists went up early claiming Torvald would be the solo tank and be overpowered in competitive play. However, the more people played him, the more he realized that he was a niche pick and not a first pick. He works brilliantly as a secondary frontline and support in certain compositions, but not in all. So, this brings us to the main question. Should tier lists always be trusted? No, never. As we have explored in this whole video, a lot of things need to be considered. The source, the timing, the author, and ultimately how much detail there is. With sites like Reddit and Paladins Guru having little to no barriers, it's very hard to find a good tier list that originates from there. As we have discussed already, there are more often than not filled with heavy bias and without much detail. That being said, closed tier lists, which means from a third party, aren't always correct. Take this as an example. Even with limited barriers to entry and great knowledge from other games, it doesn't mean you will make the best tier lists. Of course, the list was promptly corrected, but it sums up this article nicely. Always take tier lists with a grain of salt. A lot of data needs to be considered first, and most importantly, it needs to make sense. No point saying X champion is OP if you can't explain it. Self-improvement is always worth more than any tier lists. Once you understand the game mechanics at a good level, you can make your own tier list with your own thoughts. Remember, smarter gaming means faster winning. Thank you guys for watching the video. Again, I want to do more of these videos. It's education but not all Paladins focused. You can use this in other games as well. If you like the video, then okay, like it and comment below. You can also reach me on Twitter, Discord and all of those places. And subscribe as well if you want to see more content like this. Until then, champions, I will see you all in the realm.